Hi, I'm Marty Judnich with the Judnich Law Office. Today, we're going to go over the top 5 mistakes performed by attorneys and judges and other people in the criminal justice system when it comes to marijuana or THC DUIs in Montana. Why the top 5? Because marijuana and understanding what's illegal about marijuana as it pertains to DUI and alcohol and things like that gets a little confusing. So here's the top 5 mistakes most common amongst attorneys and judges and the criminal justice system when dealing with marijuana DUIs. Number 5, chain of custody. The chain of custody in a court case is what the document is that tells us where the blood goes from the person that's accused all the way to a trial or the end of testing. In a typical case, the chain of custody is going to go from the person that was tested to the phlebotomist or the person that drew the blood, then from the phlebotomist to the arresting officer, and then the arresting officer, how that blood actually ends up at the crime lab to be tested. All of that, piece by piece, step by step, every single person that touched that blood should be on the chain of custody with a signature and a date, so that when you look at the piece of paper, you can tell from the time it was drawn, where did it go until you have it or you're looking at it that day. The chain of custody is vital for the government to introduce evidence at a trial. Without it, they can't prove where that blood has been. And a chain of custody can be very problematic when a prosecutor is trying to prove a case where they don't have the chain of custody, or more importantly and common, a break in that chain of custody where they're not sure where that blood and evidence went at some point in time. These are important factors that need to be looked at every single case, and it's the number 5 most common problem in a THC DUI prosecution. Number 4, the 4th most common mistake is not understanding how metabolites from THC work in a DUI prosecution. Like any other drug that's in the human body, when your body has access to something, it will metabolize it and it'll use it, and then there's something called a metabolite that's left over in the blood. And the metabolites are really important in a DUI prosecution, particularly for THC, because there's a lot of different tests for different metabolites. And metabolites can help tell a story. Now, do they tell the whole story? No, they don't. Are metabolites illegal to have in your blood? Does that help the prosecution? No. Only the active delta-9 THC is the illegal part, but the metabolites of that, or the byproduct of that being metabolized in our body, can play a big role in understanding timing and how long ago somebody may have had marijuana in their system. And so understanding the different kind of metabolites and how they play a role in the testing and where they are, or more importantly, aren't detected in the testing, can be vital. And that's the number 4 most common problem in a DUI THC prosecution. The number 3 most common problem in a DUI prosecution that you don't see happen very much is the defense attorney's actual inspection of the blood vials themselves that have been drawn from the suspect. Ordinarily, when a police officer will have blood drawn in a THC case, the phlebotomist will pull out 2 different vials of blood. Those vials are then sealed and put in a kit and then sent to the crime lab. When we look at those vials themselves, there's a lot of information that can be on them. The person's information's supposed to be on them, their seals. One should be broken, one should be not broken, and that's part of the testing. The physical and actual inspection, handling, and checking out these blood vials can be really important in a defense of a DUI prosecution for THC. Our law firm will physically go to the crime lab and we inspect every single vial. We want to make sure, are the seals on the vials, are the correct ones broken? As I said, there's always one that's broken, there's one that's unbroken. The one that's broken is the one that the crime lab tests. That's why it's broken. But the unbroken one is left, and it's left for us, the defense, that we'll talk about in a second. If the second vial's broken, that's a pretty big deal, and that's a problem that shouldn't be broken, and there needs to be an explanation of why. There's also a series of protocols that have to be on the vials and the seals themselves that need to be sure that they're done correctly to make sure protocols were followed. And if they're not, that could lead to the exclusion of evidence that nobody would have known about unless you'd inspected the vials. So that's the number 3 most common problem with the DUI prosecution. The number 2 biggest problem and misconception is about independent testing. So as I just talked about, when a suspect has their blood drawn, there's 2 vials of blood taken. And at the crime lab, they test 1 vial. It's not all used up, there's still blood there, but there's always left 1 unbroken seal vial of blood. That's actually for the defense. That's for us to test independently if we want to do that. So if you think there's a problem in testing, or we want to verify what was or wasn't found in the blood, that's a vial of blood from the time the blood was drawn. That's our opportunity to get independent testing done on that. Big problem for people. Most people don't have that independently tested. Is it expensive? Yes. But can it be very compelling evidence that says the crime lab missed something or messed something up? Absolutely. You have the blood from what the officer says is your blood, and you can go get it tested from an unbroken vial. So very important, number 2 problem that most people miss in a DUI prosecution and defense. Number 1, the number 1 problem that we see in DUI prosecutions for THC is the lack of knowledge of chromatography. So, big fancy word, chromatography is the science of the blood testing itself. The machine or instrument that blood is actually put into to start testing it for different things is called a chromatograph. And out of the chromatograph comes a chromatogram. That little piece of, well, it's not little, it's a big piece of evidence, but that is the results. That's the results of the blood that's put into a chromatogram or a chromatograph. They come out via a chromatogram, and that tells us what that instrument is seeing in the blood. Why it's so vital is this: most attorneys and prosecutors and judges never see the actual testing of the blood. It's crazy, right? But the reality is, at least in Montana, our crime lab will then do a summary of what they say is in that chromatogram, and it's a 1-page document, and it just says, this is what we found. Not very reliable, I've found. And when you get the actual chromatogram, that is the actual record of the testing, a lot of information is on that. A lot of different things are found. You can actually see on that document that comes out in the report if there's problems with the machine, if there's a problem with the testing procedure, if the machine needs maintenance, things like that. There is a lot of information on that piece of paper that you can get and we have access to, and our office will always get 100% of the time. Very rare for most other defense attorneys to get that evidence and to really go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But that is the difference that is made between a case that has defendability and a case where you just throw your hands up and you're at the mercy of the prosecution, which is what most defense attorneys do. They don't understand chromatography, and you have to. If you're going to defend a DUI THC case, you have to understand chromatography, because that is how a case is proven. Field sobriety tests, blood tests for alcohol, things like that, none of that applies to a marijuana THC case. The only thing that matters in such a case is that blood test. If your defense attorney doesn't understand how the blood test science works, are they really going to advocate for you? The answer is simple, it's no. Come talk to the attorneys at the Judnich Law Office. Let's talk about all these misconceptions and problems and the top 5 issues for other people and other defense attorneys and judges and prosecutors not understanding how THC marijuana DUIs work in Montana. Let us help you with your case, hopefully get a great result. I'm Marty Judnich with the Judnich Law Office. You can contact us here on the website, or you can give us a call. I'm happy to talk to you, and all of our consultations are free. We'll talk to you soon.